remember the exact moment when everything changed at Meridian Creative. I was standing by the window in our downtown Chicago office, coffee in hand, watching the morning light bounce off Lake Michigan. For 7 years, I had built our creative department from nothing, just me and 2 junior designers in a cramped space above a deli, into an award-winning team that major brands fought to work with. My phone buzzed with a calendar invitation. Leadership restructuring mandatory. No context, no warning. Just a meeting in 30 minutes with the board and someone named Victoria Keller. "Did you get the invite?" asked May, our art director, appearing at my shoulder. The concern in her eyes mirrored my own unease. "Yeah? Any idea what this is about?" I tried to sound casual, but my stomach was already tightening. Marcus from accounts heard they brought in some hotshot from New York. Someone with connections to bigger clients. May lowered her voice. "They're saying it's a new creative director position." But I was the creative director. Had been since we'd opened our doors. Every successful campaign, every late night, every client we'd turned from skeptical to loyal, that was my work, my vision. I walked into the glass-walled conference room at exactly 10 a.m. The board members were already seated, along with a woman I'd never seen before. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with silver-streaked black hair cropped short. She didn't smile when our eyes met. "Daniel, thanks for joining us," said Richard, our CEO, with forced cheerfulness. "I'd like you to meet Victoria Keller. She's joining Meridian as our new executive creative director." The room seemed to tilt. "Executive creative director?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes," Richard continued. "Victoria brings 20 years of experience from the New York and London markets. She'll be overseeing all creative output moving forward. You'll be reporting directly to her." Victoria extended her hand. Her grip was firm, calculated. "I've reviewed your portfolio, Daniel. Solid work for a regional agency. I'm looking forward to elevating the team to national accounts." Regional agency. The dismissiveness in those 2 words made my face burn. We had clients in 36 states. We'd won 3 national awards last year alone. "I wasn't aware we were restructuring the creative department," I said carefully. "The board voted last week," Richard replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's time for Meridian to expand. Victoria has connections to Leighton Group." Leighton Group, the multinational holding company that owned half the luxury brands in America. The unspoken message was clear. She could bring money that I couldn't. The meeting continued, but I barely heard the details. My team would remain intact, but our processes, our approach, our creative identity, everything that made us who we were, was now subject to Victoria's approval. I returned to my office afterward, closed the door, and stood motionless. The wall of framed awards seemed to mock me now. My phone lit up with messages from the team. "Is it true? What's happening? Are we okay?" I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. 7 years of pouring everything into this place, and in 30 minutes I'd been effectively demoted. Not fired, which might have been cleaner, but sidelined. Made into a middle manager in the department I had built. That evening, I sat alone at Gino's, the dim Italian place around the corner where we celebrated every major client win. I nursed a whiskey and tried to decide what to do. Stay and fight for my vision? Leave and start over? The waiter, who knew me as a regular, kept the breadbasket full and maintained a respectful distance. My phone buzzed again. A text from May. "Team meeting tomorrow before she gets in? We need a plan." I smiled for the first time that day. At least I wasn't in this alone. Victoria made her first sweeping changes within a week. She called it bringing Meridian into the contemporary creative landscape. The rest of us called it dismantling everything that worked. Our morning creative sessions, informal, collaborative affairs where everyone from interns to seniors could pitch ideas, were replaced with structured presentations. Only senior staff could propose concepts now. The rest had to submit written briefs for approval before they could even share with the team. "We need consistency and efficiency," Victoria announced during her first department-wide meeting. She stood at the front of our common area, pointing to slides filled with workflow charts and KPIs. Creative genius is a myth. What delivers results is process. I watched my team's expressions shift from curiosity to confusion to quiet resignation, especially when she unveiled her new brand elevation framework, a rigid, formulaic approach to every client project that left little room for the intuition and spontaneity that had made our work special. Worst of all was her dismissal of our current clients. "These local accounts are fine for now," she said, flicking through our portfolio on screen. "But they're stepping stones. We'll keep them until we land the national names." Those stepping stones were companies we'd built relationships with for years, people who trusted us, who'd grown alongside us. After the meeting, May cornered me by the coffee machine. "This is insane," she whispered. "The Lakeside Brewery campaign, she wants to scrap everything and start over with her framework. 6 weeks of work gone." "I'll talk to her," I promised, though confidence wasn't high. Our first one-on-one meeting had consisted mainly of Victoria explaining why my management style was outdated. I knocked on her office door later that afternoon. She'd already replaced the local photography I'd hung with abstract prints that could have been in any office anywhere. "Daniel, what can I do for you?" Her tone suggested my interruption was barely tolerable. "It's about the Lakeside campaign. The team's put significant work into it, and the client's already enthusiastic about the direction." She sighed, removing her glasses. "I reviewed the concept. It's quaint, charming even, but it won't win awards or attract the caliber of clients we're targeting. Lakeside doesn't want awards. They want to increase taproom visits and regional distribution. The campaign speaks directly to their audience." Victoria's smile was thin. "And this is precisely the problem with regional thinking. We shouldn't just be addressing their current audience. We should be helping them find a premium positioning that attracts a more affluent demographic. That's not what they asked for. It's what they need." She turned back to her computer. "I've already briefed Amanda on the new direction." Amanda, my newest senior designer. Not me. Not May, who'd been leading the project. For the next month, I tried to shield my team while navigating Victoria's regime. I became a buffer, a translator, sometimes a secret saboteur, keeping elements of our original concepts alive inside her frameworks, preserving what I could of our creative culture. The team noticed. Small gestures of solidarity appeared. Coffee left on my desk. Inside jokes and presentation footnotes. The way they still ran ideas by me first, before taking them to Victoria. But the strain was showing. 2 designers quit. Client meetings became tense affairs, with Victoria promising capabilities we couldn't deliver, and dismissing concerns about budget or timelines. Then came the Lakeside presentation. We sat in their modest conference room, walls decorated with vintage beer signs and local sports memorabilia. The owners, Mark and Julia, had built their brewery from nothing, much like I'd built our department. They'd trusted us with their dream. Victoria presented our work, or rather her version of it. Gone was the authentic, community-focused campaign we'd developed. In its place, sleek, minimalist designs that made Lakeside look like every other craft brewery trying to appear upscale. I watched Mark and Julia exchange glances. The slight shake of Mark's head, Julia's forced smile. "This isn't what we discussed," Mark finally said. "This doesn't feel like us at all." Victoria launched into an explanation about market positioning and premium audiences. I sat silently, shame burning in my chest. Not just for the work, but for my own silence. My failure to fight harder. After the presentation, I lingered behind as Victoria headed to the car. "I'm sorry," I told Mark and Julia. "This isn't what we intended." Julia looked at me with something like pity. "What happened to you guys?" "We came to Meridian because your work had heart." I had no good answer. On the drive back to the office, Victoria was already dissecting what had gone wrong with the client, not the work. I stared out the window at the Chicago streets, wondering how much longer I could do this. The email from Lakeside Brewery landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. Subject line, "Termination of services." I read it twice before the reality sank in. They were leaving us politely, regretfully, but firmly. After 3 years as a client. I printed the email and walked straight to Victoria's office. She was on a call, but I placed the paper on her desk anyway. Her eyes scanned it, narrowed briefly. Then she continued her conversation as if nothing had happened. I waited until she hung up. "This is the 3rd client we've lost this quarter," I said. Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Clients come and go. It's the nature of the business. Not our clients. Not before you arrived." Her expression hardened. Careful, Daniel. I understand you're attached to the old way of doing things, but change is inevitable in this industry. Change, yes. Alienating loyal clients with generic work they never asked for? That's not change, it's malpractice. I hadn't planned to be so blunt. The words just erupted after months of simmering frustration. If you can't adapt to a more sophisticated approach, she began. Sophisticated? I cut her off. There's nothing sophisticated about ignoring what clients actually need, or treating their businesses like stepping stones to bigger accounts that haven't materialized. Victoria stood up. I think you need to take the rest of the day off. Clear your head. I didn't move. The team is demoralized, clients are leaving. At what point do you acknowledge that your framework isn't working here? Richard and the board seem quite pleased with our new direction. She replied coldly. Perhaps it's not the direction that's the problem, but the resistance to it. The implication was clear. I was the problem. I was the obstacle to Meridian's grand future, a future that existed only in Victoria's presentations to the board. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, mechanically reviewing designs, sitting through meetings where I said little. After everyone left, I stayed behind, moving through the quiet office. I touched the spines of our portfolio books, straightened the design awards on the shelf, ran my fingers along the wall where we'd painted our first company motto, Creativity with Purpose. Victoria had suggested painting over it last month. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie, our client manager. Lakeside called me directly, said they'd come back if we returned to original campaign direction. What should I tell them? I stood there, staring at my phone, feeling a terrible clarity descend. I'd been fighting to preserve something that was already gone. Every compromise, every silent acquiescence had only prolonged the inevitable. At home that night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights. 7 years at Meridian, countless all-nighters, friendships forged in deadline trenches, the pride of building something meaningful. I opened my laptop and began to type my resignation letter. The words came easily, without anger, just certainty. I would not be the caretaker of my own creative funeral. But as I was about to hit send, another email arrived. From May, timestamped 1:18 a.m. Don't make any decisions yet, we need to talk. Breakfast tomorrow? The usual place, 7 a.m. The usual place was a diner near the office where we'd held countless emergency creative sessions. I replied with a simple "I'll be there" and closed my laptop. I hardly slept. By morning, resignation still felt right, but May deserved to hear it from me first. She'd been there since almost the beginning. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. May was already in our regular booth, but she wasn't alone. Amanda was there. So were Trey and Jamie and Sophia, all senior team members. 5 faces looked up at me expectantly as I approached. "What's this about?" I asked, sliding into the booth. May pushed a coffee toward me. "We know you're thinking of leaving. We would be too. But we have another idea." Trey, our digital lead, leaned forward. "Victoria met with the board yesterday. Presented a restructuring plan that moves half our jobs to their New York office." I felt a cold shock. "How do you know this?" "Richard's assistant tipped me off," Jamie said. "They're keeping it quiet until after the Leighton pitch next month." May's eyes held mine. "We think it's time to make a stand. Together. But we need you with us." "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. The path was materializing before me, both terrifying and exhilarating. "We have options," Sophia said quietly. "But they all start with the same question. Are you in?" 5 pairs of eyes waited for my answer. Outside, Chicago was waking up. Traffic sounds filtered through the windows. A new day beginning. I took a deep breath and said the only thing I could. "Tell me everything." The plan came together over plates of half-eaten breakfast food. May had already done the research, the legal implications, the financial risks, the timeline. It shouldn't have surprised me. She'd always been 10 steps ahead. "Victoria is banking everything on the Leighton Group pitch," Sophia explained, pushing a folder across the table. "If she lands it, the board will give her carte blanche to restructure however she wants." I flipped through the pages. Charts, projections, internal emails Sophia had accessed through her role in account management. The picture was even worse than I'd thought. Victoria wasn't just changing our creative approach. She was dismantling our entire local client base in favor of chasing national accounts that might never materialize. "So what exactly are we proposing?" I asked. Trey leaned forward. "A counterpitch. We go to Richard with a plan to retain our existing clients while still pursuing growth. Show him that Victoria's approach is costing us more than it's bringing in. And if that doesn't work?" I knew the answer before asking. Amanda spoke for the first time. "We leave. Together. Start something new." My heart raced at the thought. The risk was enormous. But so was the prospect of watching everything we'd built crumble under Victoria's leadership. "We've already spoken with Lakeside," Jamie added, "and Porter Media, and Freshline Foods. They'd follow us." "When do we move?" I asked. 3 weeks, May replied. "Before the Leighton presentation. We need to gather evidence, prepare our case, and be ready for either outcome." We dispersed with assignments. Mine was to document the creative process changes and their impact on work quality and team morale. May would handle the financial analysis. Trey would compile client feedback. A shadow operation within our own agency. I felt alive again. The weight of helplessness lifted. Whatever happened, we were taking action. Together. We were careful, of course. Our regular work continued. I attended Victoria's meetings, implemented her frameworks, offered muted resistance where expected. The perfect cover, a beaten-down creative director going through the motions. Victoria noticed the change but misinterpreted it. "I'm glad to see you're finally accepting the new direction," she told me after I quietly approved one of her concept revisions. Her satisfaction was almost worth the bitter taste in my mouth. Meanwhile, our evidence mounted. Client satisfaction metrics had plummeted. Staff turnover had doubled. 3 major accounts were on the verge of leaving. The Meridian that had thrived for 7 years was dying by spreadsheet. 2 weeks in, a complication. Victoria announced she'd be personally leading the Leighton pitch. "Your presence won't be necessary, Daniel," she informed me. "I'll handle the creative presentation myself." This was unexpected. We'd assumed I'd be in the room, able to gauge reactions, perhaps even speak up at a critical moment. "She's cutting you out completely," May said when I told the group. We'd taken a meeting at my apartment in the evenings, safe from office eyes. "We need to accelerate." "Richard still trusts me," I said. "I can get a meeting." The next morning, I requested 30 minutes with our CEO. His assistant eyed me suspiciously, but scheduled me in for the following afternoon. Just enough time to finalize our presentation. That night, as I compiled our findings into a compelling narrative, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this Daniel Walsh?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Speaking. "This is Catherine Byers from Leighton Group. We haven't been properly introduced. I'm heading up the agency selection committee." My blood froze. How had she gotten my personal number? "I understand your agency is pitching us next week," she continued. "But I've received some concerning information. An anonymous email suggesting internal conflicts at Meridian that might affect your ability to service our account. Someone had leaked, or Victoria had somehow discovered our plan." "I'd like to hear your perspective," Catherine said. "Perhaps over coffee tomorrow?" I gripped the phone tighter, mind racing through possibilities. This could destroy everything, or be our unexpected opening. "Coffee sounds perfect," I replied. "There's actually quite a lot I think you should know." Catherine Byers wasn't what I expected. No power suit or aggressive handshake, just a woman in jeans and a blazer, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. We sat in a corner of an artsy cafe far from Meridian's offices. "So," she said after we'd settled with our drinks, "tell me what's really happening at Meridian Creative." I hesitated. The professional thing would be to lie, to protect the agency despite everything. But I was tired of pretending. "Victoria Keller was hired to transform the agency," I began. "But transformation doesn't always mean improvement." I laid out the situation honestly. Not a vindictive rant, but the plain facts. How Victoria's rigid frameworks had stripped our work of its distinctive character. How client relationships built over years were being sacrificed for hypothetical growth. How a culture of collaboration had been replaced with top-down dictates. Catherine listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a small leather notebook. "And what about you in all this?" she finally asked. "Creative directors with your track record don't usually stay in situations like this." "I built that department," I said simply. Those people are my responsibility. If there's any chance of saving what works while still evolving. She nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying. Victoria's presentation to us emphasized your agency's new premium positioning and exclusive clientele strategy. She specifically mentioned dropping smaller accounts to focus on clients like us. My stomach tightened. Those smaller accounts are successful businesses that trust us. They're not stepping stones. Catherine closed her notebook. Here's what you should know about Leighton, Daniel. We manage luxury brands, yes, but we value authenticity above all. Our consumers can spot manufactured prestige a mile away. She leaned forward. I've seen Victoria's preliminary work. It's polished but empty. Like 1,000 other agencies trying to look impressive. Hope flickered. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to see what Meridian was creating before Victoria arrived. And I'd like to meet your team. Your actual team, not just the figureheads. I left the cafe with a strange mixture of exhilaration and dread. Catherine had effectively offered us a lifeline, but using it meant openly defying Victoria. The meeting with Richard was in 3 hours. I needed to decide, stick with our original plan or gamble everything on Leighton's interest. I called an emergency gathering at May's apartment. The team listened intently as I recounted the conversation. This changes everything, Trey said when I finished. If Leighton prefers our approach over Victoria's, we don't know that for sure, I cautioned. And even if they do, Richard might still back Victoria. She's his hire. His reputation is tied to her success. May paced the small living room. Then we present both options to Richard. Plan A. We work directly with Leighton, keeping Victoria out of it. Plan B. We leave and take Leighton with us as our first client. The boldness of it was breathtaking and terrifying. We need to be prepared for the fallout, Amanda warned. Victoria won't go quietly. We spent the next 2 hours refining our presentation, building 2 clear pathways forward. By the time I walked into Richard's office, I was calm. Whatever happened next, we were done with half measures. Richard greeted me with the distant cordiality of a man with too many fires to put out. Daniel, what's so urgent? I connected my laptop to the display screen. I need to show you something about the agency's direction. 10 minutes into my presentation, Richard's polite interest had transformed into focused concern. By the time I reached the client retention numbers, he was openly alarmed. Why am I just hearing about this now, he demanded. Because Victoria has been managing the narrative, I replied. She's promised you national prestige and you wanted to believe it was possible without sacrificing what already works. His expression hardened at the implied criticism. Victoria has extensive experience in New York, with different clients, different market dynamics, and teams she could build from scratch. She's been trying to force Meridian into a mold it doesn't fit. I pulled up our proposal, a hybrid approach that maintained our core strengths while thoughtfully expanding into new markets, not dismantling what worked, but building upon it. And if I don't agree? Richard asked quietly. I took a deep breath. Then you should know that Catherine Byers from Leighton Group has expressed interest in our original creative team. Whether that team exists within Meridian or I let the alternative hang in the air. The door opened before Richard could respond. Victoria stood in the doorway, face tight with controlled fury. I see you've been busy, she said, eyes fixed on my presentation screen, going behind my back to both Richard and our potential client. The moment of crisis had arrived sooner than expected. I stood, ready to face whatever came next. The silence in Richard's office was absolute. Victoria moved from the doorway to stand beside his desk, a united front against me. You contacted a prospective client without authorization, she said, each word precise and damning. That alone is grounds for immediate termination. Catherine Byers contacted me, I corrected, after receiving information about internal issues at Meridian. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Which you provided? No, but I didn't deny them either. I turned to Richard. This isn't about me versus Victoria. It's about the future of Meridian. The numbers don't lie. Richard rubbed his temples. Both of you sit down. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Denise, cancel my next appointment and ask Mei Chen to join us immediately. Victoria looked startled. Why involve? Because she has the financial analysis I need to see. Richard cut her off. And because I suspect she's part of whatever is happening here. The next hour was excruciating. May arrived with our complete dossier, professional to the core as she walked Richard through the data. Victoria alternated between dismissive rebuttals and thinly veiled threats about the consequences of this mutiny. Richard mostly listened, asking occasional pointed questions. The CEO who had been so easily swayed by Victoria's promises was gone. In his place was the shrewd businessman who had built Meridian from the ground up before focusing on other ventures in the parent company. Finally, he held up his hand. Enough. Here's what's going to happen. Victoria, your restructuring plan is on hold. Daniel, your team will handle the Leighton presentation with input from Victoria. That's not, Victoria began. Not negotiable, Richard finished for her. I've heard enough to know we have a serious problem. Whether it's your approach or resistance to change, I don't yet know. The Leighton pitch will tell me what I need to know. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't a defeat. It was a trial by fire. The next 2 weeks were a tense armistice. Victoria was still executive creative director on paper, but Richard had effectively split authority between us. We developed the Leighton presentation with nominal input from her, though she fought us on every slide, every concept. The team rallied magnificently, late nights fueled by determination rather than fear. The work was some of our best, authentic, strategic, and distinctively Meridian. Not Victoria's Meridian, or even my Meridian, but something that represented our collective strengths. On presentation day, we arrived at Leighton's downtown offices as a united front, at least in appearance. Victoria, Richard, May, Trey, and me. Catherine greeted us warmly, with particular attention to May and Trey. The message wasn't subtle. She knew who the real team was. I won't detail the presentation itself. Some professional moments are sacred, beyond retelling. But I will say this. When Trey revealed our core campaign concept, a strategy that honored Leighton's luxury foundations while connecting with younger consumers through genuine cultural engagement, the energy in the room shifted. Even Victoria seemed momentarily captivated by the work. Catherine's team asked insightful questions. We answered honestly, without corporate doublespeak. When one executive expressed concerns about execution capacity, Victoria finally spoke up, not to contradict us, but to reinforce Meridian's technical capabilities. A surprising moment of solidarity. Afterward, in the hallway outside the conference room, Richard pulled me aside. That's what I've been missing, he said quietly. Work that makes people lean forward in their chairs. A week later, we got the call. Leighton had chosen Meridian. With specific conditions, our original team would lead creative, with Victoria focusing on operational expansion and new business development. Her strengths without her interference. She wasn't happy, of course. But with Richard now fully engaged and monitoring the situation, she adapted. Gradually, a new equilibrium emerged. Victoria brought valuable structure and connections. We preserved the creative soul that made those connections worth having. Some of the team members still whisper about our rebellion during late work sessions, how we nearly walked away, how we forced a reckoning. The story grows more dramatic with each telling. The truth is both simpler and more complex. We didn't win, exactly. Victoria didn't lose. We found an uneasy, productive middle ground that made Meridian stronger than either extreme would have allowed. I still have the resignation letter I drafted that night, saved in a folder on my desktop. Sometimes I open it, reading the words of a man pushed to his breaking point. Then I close it unchanged. A reminder of certain lines that cannot be crossed. By Victoria, by me, by anyone who values what we've built together. Last week, a junior designer asked me how I've survived so long in a creative industry known for burnout and disillusionment. You have to know what you're fighting for, I told her. And sometimes, fighting doesn't mean winning. It means finding a way forward when there seems to be none. We stood by the window where, months earlier, I'd received the calendar invitation that changed everything. The city skyline gleamed in the afternoon light. Defiant, resilient, transformed but unbroken, much like us.